All right, boys and girls, it's Unhappy Tuesday this time. Coming to you live from our humble abodes from the 215 to the 513. This is Green Legion Radio's Unhappy and the MP. Happy to have you with us here on a Tuesday evening. A little bit weird on a Tuesday. Kind of throws my whole week off. I'm not quite sure. It'll get to Thursday. I'll think it's Friday. It'll kind of screw shit up, but we'll be all right. So we thank you for joining us from wherever you may be, whatever device you're using, whatever service you're using to stream us now. We are back up on not just YouTube, but also Facebook and X. You can follow us there on any of those Green Legion platforms. So, without further ado, pull up a chair. Turn up the volume if you got it. Use the company dime if you're still stuck at work. Crack open a cold one if you're trying to I don't know what the hell you're trying to do on a Tuesday night. And let's try to have some fun as we'll put an end to day 2 of this week's hostage situation and look forward to tomorrow being Hump Day. Showing my age a little bit there. Lou Mancini in the room. What's up, brother? David Loeb, nice to see you. Keenan Hartman says Toothache Tuesday. That sounds unpleasant, brother. Lou from Dade stopping in. Happy Tuesday, everybody. And as always, Lou from Dade, hit that like button. Absolutely. Whether you're streaming us on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, X, sorry. Make sure you like, follow, share, subscribe, pass the word around. Lord knows we can always use the support. We do push the YouTube channel first and foremost, but you can get us on any of those other platforms as well. So, Mason wasn't able to join us last week. Again, hey, guys, week to week, the work schedule thing, we may be Tuesday, we may be Wednesday, we may be Thursday. Work schedules are work schedules, right? Mine's been very hectic. I know Mason's can be all over the place as well. So we were without Mason last week. So, brother, how have you been enjoying yourself the last couple of weeks?
Well, I do apologize for missing last week's show. I obviously would have made it if I could, but sometimes the late shifts happen on unfortunate days. I'm not able to trade in time, so unfortunately, stuff happens. But I am excited because I really was actually looking forward to last week because there was so much developments with the birds and everything like that, and so unfortunately, I wasn't able to kind of, keep up with everything with that. But we do have the tournament coming through. I just checked on ESPN, and officially there are 0 brackets remaining, and we're already at Sweet 16, which is disappointing, and it kind of takes a little bit of the suspense out of the tournament. But nonetheless, we got March Madness going on. We have a lot of stuff happening with the birds, and so I'm just happy, or I'm looking forward to a recap of everything.
Yeah, so I kept it light with the birds last week in anticipation of you being back this week. So I kept it pretty tournament heavy for the second half of the show. We did Boner of the Week and stuff like that. I kept it off of the Eagles as much as possible in anticipation of you being back this week so that you had the opportunity to dive into that. I didn't want to steal all the thunder there. But before – what else we got here? Keenan Hartman, good evening, all you maniacs. Fanny joins the room, hanging out with the cool kids tonight. Let's get through with the business and the stuff. And she is home this time. Everyone, it brings me great pleasure to bring you Michelle's favorite part of the show. We are proudly sponsored by Cheerleaders Gentlemen's Club, located at 2740 South Front Street in Philadelphia. Just minutes away from the sports complex, Cheerleaders brings you the area's most beautiful women on 5 different stages. Open from noon until 2 a.m. and until 4 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Also offering free parking, a full menu, daily drink and food specials, and a premium selection of cigars in a cigar lounge. If you're looking for a place to take in some of this NCAA tournament madness that has transpired and will continue to transpire, head on over to Cheerleaders and enjoy the 75-foot HD TV wall, as well as HD TV screens throughout the entire club. Once again, folks, that's Cheerleaders Gentlemen's Club, located at 2740 South Front Street in Philadelphia. Call 215-467-1980 for all of your group and party information and to reserve a private booth if that's your thing. Folks, always at the bottom of the screen, greenlegion.com, scrolling across there every time we go live. the best and longest tenured in the business. If you're looking for a way to do an away trip or you're looking for a home tailgate in Philly, look no further. Head over to greenlegion.com, click on trips and tailgates, select the one you want to go on, and fire away. Right now, taking early bird deposits for all 2026 away games. Okay? No home tailgate stuff yet. This is all deposits for full travel packages for the 2026 road schedule. San Francisco, Nashville, Chicago, Jacksonville, Dallas, Arizona, all on the schedule this year. Some pretty cool destinations. Your early bird deposit is $250 per person. So if you wanted to sign up and you wanted to go to Nashville, I use pretty much the same example every week. Say Mason and I wanted to go to Nashville. We're going to go in there, click on trips and tailgates, click on the Nashville trip, put our deposit in, $250 each for the Nashville trip. The schedule for the NFL season will come out mid-May, and all of a sudden, shit, the Nashville trip doesn't work. It's a bad weekend. It's Thanksgiving weekend, something like that. But Chicago is on a weekend that works well. Contact the Green Legion. Let them know, hey, I can't make the trip that I put my deposit in for. I would like to move to the Chicago trip instead. You can slide right over into the Chicago trip, not lose your place in line. If for some reason all of the away trips, no weekend works for you, through the month of May, you will still be able to get a full refund on your early bird deposit. Now, once June comes, you're SOL. So act quickly, and I encourage you to get that early bird deposit in as soon as possible. That is for a limited time. One other thing, I think I've beaten it to death with the Reaper contest. If you haven't gotten word of that already, head on over to the Green Legion Facebook page, Instagram, X, and you'll be able to see all the details on that really, really cool idea that the team has come up with to try to fill the enormous shoes being left behind by one Captain Q, or Uncle Craig, as we like to call him. Funny story behind that one. But yeah, that's your spiel. So, David Loeb, what is going on over here? What are you guys talking about over here? Lou from Dade. Cheerleaders, baby. What better place to spend Titty Tuesday than Taco Tuesday? Very good. Lou gives Taco Tuesday a whole new meaning. All right. And we go downhill from here. Always very proud of everyone in the room. David Loeb, of course, pushing the Arizona trip. That's the one he is going on. I was on that trip back in 22. Excellent accommodations. We stayed in Scottsdale. Beautiful area. It's a little bit of a distance to get over to State Farm Stadium, but it's well worth it. And the tailgate was out of this world. The food spread was amazing. The location was awesome. Excellent trip. That is definitely one I recommend. Michelle and I have put our deposit in for Nashville. Now, we used to live down there, so it's kind of familiar to us. It's a drive for us, so we don't have to deal with airfare. So right now, the plan is we will be down there for Nashville. Schedule comes out, things could change, but here we are. Fanny, how are you feeling? I'm all right there. I'll live. I've got the resumes are updated, and the job hunt is in full swing. So I've got a 12 p.m. Initial call tomorrow with a company that's just one town over, which is already a step in the right direction rather than driving 40 minutes to work. So we'll get through it, just like we always do. But and off script this week, didn't really have much. I think the tournament kind of speaks for itself. I don't know how many of you play brackets out there. I run a bracket challenge with the Midwest Eagles Nest here. Mason, I know we talked pre-show. You said you don't really do that stuff. You just like to enjoy watching the games. I do both, which is kind of fucking stupid when you look at it, right? Like, I make all these picks, and then I find myself rooting against the teams that I pick because I just want to see the upset. right?
Yeah.
Like I should pick all underdogs just so I can enjoy myself.
You gotta hedge your bets.
You're right. But the obviously the biggest stunner so far, Iowa knocking off Florida, the defending champs, and a team that for the second half of the regular season was probably the best team in the country for at least most of the second half of the NCAA season. So big surprise there. I know my friend David Conant didn't think Florida was all that good. I beg to differ. I think if Iowa and Florida play 10 times, Florida wins 8 or 9 of them. Just so happened one of those other 2 was this past Sunday, man. So that's the tournament. That's the way it goes. Congrats to Iowa. That kid hitting that shot at the end there. And then I don't know what the hell Florida's thinking. That kid drives down and he drives himself right underneath the basket. It's like, bro, you got to come in at an angle. Take a tip from the kid from St. John's who went and beat Kansas on a buzzer beater. But we've had some exciting shit, right? Saturday was a little bit of a dud. A lot of blowouts throughout the afternoon, not a whole lot going on. The evening picked up, got a little better. Sunday was the day. You had, even Arizona was starting to get a little bit shaky down the stretch. Florida getting knocked off, St. John's with the buzzer beater against Kansas. And now we look ahead to the Sweet 16, where, well, we've got, where is the bracket? There we go. So this is just going to pull up my bracket here, and I'll go over our standings here in just a minute. But your Sweet 16 matchups, you got Duke and St. John's, which is the matchup I wanted. I want to see Duke sweat. Now I do still think Duke wins this game. But what's his name? Ejiofor from St. John's, the Big East Player of the Year, Big East Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he was all Big East everything. He's going to be a handful for anybody. On the bottom of that East bracket, you've got Michigan State and UConn. So that bracket, that East, those 2 Sweet 16 matchups, the East, I think, has all the juice this weekend. Not to say that there's not other good matchups. Arizona, Arkansas should be good too. But, I mean, when you look at the coaching, the blue blood nature of some of these teams, obviously Duke, UConn, Michigan State, St. John's just trying to come back into the fold now, but they're coached by Rick Pitino, right? So while St. John's not a blue blood, Pitino's been around a long time. This is the 4th team he's taken to the Sweet 16. Pretty impressive, right? And UConn can't figure them out. We've beaten them once since Pitino took that program back over. It's fucking annoying. But those 2. So you got Friday night, Duke and St. John's at 7:10, Michigan State, UConn, Friday night at 9:45. That's going to be a little tough for me to stay awake for that one, but I'll try to grin and bear it. So looking at this, let's just take the East for now. There hasn't been much in the way of big upsets. South Florida beating Louisville, okay. TCU over Ohio State, that's a 9 beating an 8. It's not a huge upset.
No.
A lot of this has gone chalk. I was surprised. I fell asleep during the UConn game on Sunday night, admittedly. As big a fan as I am, I was exhausted. And, we were not getting consistent guard play. And, I expected to wake up and at best see a very, very narrow victory. I would not have been surprised if I woke up and saw that UCLA had beaten UConn. Right. However, we roll on to a 16-point victory. That was a comforting thing to see in the morning. Apparently, Alex Caravan went berserk in the second half, and the defense clamped down. So that was nice. But that East bracket overall, you've been watching games. What's your stance?
So me individually, whenever I as much as I try to kind of peep my head into what exactly is going on there, I've been kind of very interested in Michigan, partly because when I was at Temple, I went to Temple University. My roommate was the biggest Michigan fan of pretty much all sports that you can be. He's a huge Michigan fan. I have no idea why, but
Michigan or Michigan State?
Michigan.
Okay, Michigan. So that's the Midwest. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to keep a little bit of tabs on them, but nonetheless, If we are trying to look at the East there, yeah, I mean Duke has always been kind of the perennial kind of player in college basketball, so it almost seems like a cop out to kind of mention anything regarding them. Nonetheless, St. John's is kind of a nice kind of contender to kind of see how far they can get, go far. I have heard exactly what you said regarding the Patino and how storied his career has been, everything like that. So it's going to be fun to watch in that regard. And then with Michigan State and UConn's also, although it's much more powerful with the women's basketball, nonetheless, there's a lot of good lineage there. And it's not surprised to see either UConn or Michigan State, sticking around.
Yeah, so UConn men, the most, when you talk championships, the most successful program since 1999. 6 championships since 1999. Yeah, we'll just throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, there's not been much in the way of drama. You know, St. John's, Kansas with the buzzer beater, great. Not been much in the way of drama as far as the East bracket goes. It's been pretty much chalk, aside from that South Florida win over Louisville in the opening round.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it Duke playing UConn. I think the chalk trends continue. I've got Duke and UConn for the Elite Eight, which will happen on Sunday.
Is that Sunday?
Yeah, that game will be Sunday. They play Friday. So So it'll be a Sunday matchup for the Elite Eight, Duke and UConn. A little bit of a bummer. I was hoping UConn would end up with the Thursday game, for the Sweet 16. So that if they won, they would play Saturday, because I've got my March Madness get-together with our Eagles group here on Saturday evening. And that would have been, they all get to see me lose my shit, for something aside from Birds games every week. But I've got a Duke versus UConn in that one. Yeah, Lou, I understand. I know Ash is look, I'm not going to be upset if Duke loses. When Duke loses, America wins, as far as I'm concerned. But I do think Duke is just going to be a little too much for St. John's to handle overall. Not right out of the gates, but as the game wears on, kind of much the way they did with TCU. They started out a little slow, but ended up winning by 23. And while I don't think it'll be a 23-point victory, I do think Duke wins. They probably lock it down late. UConn and Michigan State. Tom Izzo likes to play a brand of basketball that'll put some people to sleep. It's a slow grind. Unfortunately for him, UConn can also play that brand of basketball. So, we'll see what happens with that one. I've got a Duke UConn. It would not surprise me if it was St. John's, Michigan State at all, really. All 4 teams really talented and very, very deserving. Move down to the South. Now things start to get a little wonky, right? So your Sweet 16 matchups here are Iowa and Nebraska. Nebraska, who came into the tournament having never won a game in the tournament. They've now won 2 to get themselves, with now a legitimate shot at an Elite Eight appearance here, because Iowa took care of Florida, right? Mm-hmm. So that one's Thursday night at 7:30. And then the bottom half of the bracket, outside of North Carolina getting beat, pretty much chalky. Got Illinois versus Houston. Illinois is a nice team, but Houston's a freaking powerhouse, dude. I had Vanderbilt going to the Elite Eight against Houston. Vanderbilt got knocked out by Nebraska. And so it's Houston versus, I got to believe, I don't know. I don't know what happens Iowa versus Nebraska. Now you get a Big Ten matchup here that nobody expected to happen in the Sweet 16. Iowa coming off that really, really emotional clutch victory, and Nebraska kind of feeling themselves now, having won a couple of games for the first time in their program's history. Should be a lot of fun. Ultimately, I think it's Houston that comes out of this bracket. That's the way I picked it anyways. But looking forward to that early game on Thursday night. because Lord knows I am not making it to 10 o'clock on Thursday night. There's no way that's happening. I am not going to see a blink of that Illinois-Houston game. Not that I think I'll need to, but Lou from Dade, yeah. A couple of football schools dueling for a spot in the Elite Eight. I know. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
Pretty cool. You been following the South at all here, or?
Not as much as the other ones, but I was kind of peeping that Iowa Nebraska game a little bit, and it's kind of interesting. So on ESPN, the match predictor has Iowa with a 40% chance of winning, but the odds are about as tight as you can get. I mean, the money line is essentially even. The spread is Nebraska by 1.5. And so with these teams, Iowa obviously with a huge upset, and then Nebraska, as you said, not really too used to being at least remotely this far into the bracket. It is kind of two teams are kind of feeling a little bit lucky to be there, even though Nebraska, kind of you could say treasure in their own way a little bit more than perhaps Iowa, who perhaps might be just lucky to be there. But what you said about Nebraska kind of having an easy kind of a path right to Houston because of Iowa, of course, completely agree in that respect. But obviously, this is
It's March, dude.
Yeah, no, like I was about to say, like whenever it comes to any kind of brackets or tournaments or any playoff type things, I always think back to a clip I was watching about like Ed Reed was going through the Ravens locker room and he was going over the 2012 year where they won the Super Bowl. And he's going through all the trophies of the playoffs. And like the reporter was like, oh, so like the Super Bowl was like the most important game of that year. And he goes, no, it's actually the wild card round. Because in order to get to there, you have to win here first. And
Right.
So you can't ever just have your eyes set on the Elite Eight or
Nope.
or anything like that. I had to take it one round at a time. I think that plays a lot into Iowa's favor. You saw a couple other upsets popping up all over the bracket there, and it all just comes down to tunnel vision. You got to focus on the opponent in front of you, and if you don't, then it might end up being Florida or FAU or Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they knocked off the defending champs. Impressive to say the least. Over to the other side of the bracket, you got the West at the top here. Arizona looking very much the part that everyone thought they would. Again, second half was a little bit tighter than I thought it would be against Utah State. Hats off to Utah State, and congratulations to Lou Dominguez on Arizona with the Sweet 16 appearance. Obviously, that's not nearly the goal. Lou, a lot like a lot of us, has Arizona at minimum in the Final Four. I actually have Arizona winning the whole thing. I have them beating Duke in the final. But they just absolutely annihilated the 16 seed to start the thing off. They do end up beating Utah State, pulled away late with a 12-point victory. And now they get Arkansas in the Sweet 16. Arkansas, your SEC champ, who, High Point knocking off Wisconsin was fun to watch. And then, and High Point really taking Arkansas to the limit. They really showed up, man. That was it. And you can see the kids were all full of emotion at the end of that game too. That's the part where you feel bad, man. You see these kids that have a chance to be the Cinderella Sweet 16 team and come up just a little short, and they are just absolutely devastated. And it's like, kids, hold your head high. Nobody thinks High Point belongs in, even in the dance, let alone winning a first round game against a 5 seed. And then pushing the 4 seed and SEC champ to the limit in the second round. So, hats off to High Point for their effort. But rightfully, Arizona, Arkansas in the Sweet 16. And I'm not – nothing at this point in the tournament should be an easy victory, although we'll end up with a few that end up being blowouts. Nothing should be easy. So as talented and as great as I believe Arizona is, Arkansas is good. And 9:45 on Thursday night. This is another one that I'll be like this. Tip off. Oh, great. I'll wake up and see what happened there. But I do expect Arizona to win, but I expect them to get pushed. They got pushed by Utah State. I expect I expect Arkansas to push them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom half of that bracket, Purdue sliding through. Texas. This is where I had trouble. What do you mean you lost sound, Lou? Anybody else say losing sound, or is it something Lou did to his phone or computer?
I gotcha.
I can hear you. I'm sure you can hear me. Texas. So Texas was a play-in, right? They were part of the first four, and I didn't really have the time to wait on finishing my bracket, so I just took BYU. I liked Texas. I thought you could have made an argument they should have been in without having to be in the first four. I knew they were going to be a pain in the ass. And here they are. They've won 2 games. Well, they've won 3 now. They won the first 4. Then they beat BYU. Then they beat Gonzaga. Gonzaga yet another year where they're a top 3 seed in a bracket in a region, and another year where they come up short. And I just got to believe that this is very much about the lack of real competition that they're going to face throughout the year. Once the conference play starts after like end of December into the beginning of January, they're just playing their conference, which is not that good. Prior to that, they can schedule UConn or Duke or St. John's or some of these teams. But once that conference schedule starts up, they're easily no sound. So we have no sound. How the hell did that happen? That is interesting.
Is it across a certain platform?
I don't know. Well, let me see here. That's a fucking problem. So that's 2 people. That's Mancini and Andy Bagley. If you're still in here and you're on X, can you hear us on X? I'm wondering. So he can hear us on X. Guys, it's probably a YouTube thing. Because Andy's got us hearing us fine on X. So if you got Keenan says he's got us fine on YouTube. I don't know, unless you guys are having some kind of hiccup. I don't know. We can hear each other fine. Andy's fine. Yeah. Keenan's fine. Sounds like it might just be random. So I'm not going to. All right. Yeah. Lou from Dade says we're back up now. Might have just been a hiccup with YouTube. I couldn't tell you. It doesn't give me anything here. I don't see anything on the screen telling me that our sound is out. So sorry about that if you guys had a bit of a pause there, but we're talking about Gonzaga real quick, where they are, once again, a disappointment as a 3 seed. They get beat by Texas, and now Texas will go play the number 2 seed Purdue, who at this point in the tournament, with Painter as their head coach, this is where they start to trip and fall. Here, the Elite 8, they've had some trouble in the past. Texas right now is your Cinderella. Obviously coming out of that first 4, and now on to the Sweet 16. So they are your Cinderella. See what they can do with Purdue. I have it Arizona versus Purdue. After the Sweet, going into the Elite 8. I know you've been chomping at the bit for the bottom half of this with the Midwest because of Michigan, but have you been? Were you able to watch any games out of the West?
Well, I was able to go ahead and see as soon as I saw that Gonzaga score, I kind of felt like it was Groundhog Day all over again, just because of what you kind of said regarding the history of Gonzaga. Always kind of, because I do remember them being in the finals a few years, probably more than a few years ago, and always kind of hitting a glass ceiling in that regard. But no, I obviously Texas is the one with the Cinderella story there. Compared to anybody else, maybe Iowa could be, the next guy, but seeding wise, it's gonna be Texas and Arizona. I read going into the tournament how strong of a contender Arizona was, and with all the other kind of big dogs there, so it's not surprised to see Arizona get that far. Arkansas is going to be a gritty contest. Going to be really interesting to see there. And being that Texas is the kind of Cinderella of this year, going to be fun to kind of root for them to see if they can kind of push the envelope anymore. But it does look pretty clear that it's going to be a cleanup session for Purdue, nonetheless, as it does also kind of mirror that same sentiment for Arizona.
Yeah, and, some of the sentiment you go with is, you want to try to pick your upsets and get them right, obviously, because if you pick upsets and you get those wrong, then there's going to be other upsets that happened that you didn't pick, and that's where your bracket gets blown up. But you want to pick your upsets early, chalk late, right? And this is where things start. The Sweet 16 is where things should start to separate. Right. Never know with a team like Texas, though, man. They could be a giant pain in the ass. Now we move to the bottom of the Midwest, where we've got Michigan, who is, they're pretty much on cruise control, dude. 21-point victory in the open round, a 23-point victory over St. Louis in the second round. Mm-hmm. Now they'll take on an Alabama team here in the Sweet 16. Alabama, talented. I do not believe they belong on the court with Michigan, dude. I just don't. They are, like I said, they are talented, but Michigan is, they're just a Michigan belongs, right? Like they're blowing people out on their way through here. So Texas Tech beats Akron. Yeah, not much in the way. The disappointment out of this bracket was Virginia losing to Tennessee. Tennessee notorious for screwing the pooch come big dance time. They do it with their football team too, come the playoffs or a big game against a Georgia or something late in the season. Tennessee usually comes up small in those moments. They did not. They handled business against Virginia. It was a competitive second half, and Tennessee took care of it at the end. And now they will take on Iowa State, who is the team that I picked to come out of this bracket. Iowa State also very much looking the part. A 34-point victory in the opening round and a 19-point victory over Kentucky in the second round. Now they'll take on Tennessee. I've got this 1 versus 2 in the Elite Eight with Michigan versus Iowa State, and I've got Iowa State winning that. As good as Michigan is, that Iowa State team, the only knock I've got on them is a few times this year they've ran out to big leads and collapsed in the second half. So go ahead, run with your Michigan stuff here.
Yeah, so prior to the tournament, like I said, I was kind of just skimming through all the teams, and Arizona was a big dog, and Michigan was right up there. Kind of back further in the show with your Chris Bohan. With the Iowa and the Nebraska, the 2 football schools. This isn't the National Football Championship, so this is March Madness. Even though it's Michigan and Alabama, though. Nonetheless, as you said, Michigan just all cruise control to be their a powerhouse. Never really kind of fretting about the state of many games, and so I have no gripes or frets about them kind of going through Alabama there. Nonetheless, as you said, Tennessee and then Iowa State. Kind of just going back here again. You have Tennessee, like you said, upsetting Virginia, and then Iowa State taking care of business with Kentucky. I am going to kind of go on a little bit of a contrarian here. We're going to kind of hedge a bet against you and say I think that you can see Michigan going 1 and 2, like I said, like you said, rather. And might see Michigan kind of coming up on top there and seeing if they can't get all the way to the Final Four, if not. And so that'll be a lot of fun to watch. But I have both Michigan and Iowa State winning this.
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. Lou, talking about Texas, I would say that Cinderella by seed, yes, but no mid-majors left. NIS killed it for the Cinderella small schools. Yes, I agree. I agree. And, Mason and I have talked about that. That's a topic we are going to dive into when we get to the point where there's no content, right? Because it does happen, right? We get past all the NFL free agency, we get past the tournament. Things start. We're gonna. Baseball's gonna pick up starting tomorrow night and on through the weekend. Thank God. But you do get lulls throughout especially come summertime. Once NHL and NBA is wrapped up, and when you get to that All-Star break, dude, and it's a rough go. So the NIL and transfer portal stuff is definitely going to be. I would tell you at some point it's going to be a full show's worth of shit on that front at some point. But I agree with you, Lou. It has kind of wrecked it. That's why I like seeing a team like High Point, right? Go and win that game.
Some of my favorite tournament memories are like when Colgate went as far, Oral Roberts that one year. I think it was a 15 seed. I think they made like the Final Four or the Elite Eight at least.
You had a Fairleigh Dickinson making runs. It was fun. But he's Lou's spot on with that one. Andy Bagley says the Tide will knock off Michigan. They can score. So can Michigan. Hey, look, I when you get to this point, I don't expect, even though I know a couple of these are going to turn into blowouts, I don't expect to see blowouts. I expect to see competitive basketball games, right? The cream rising to the top. We just talked about all the NIL and the mid-majors are gone. Well, okay, now they're gone. You guys got what you wanted. It's all
right.
It's all major conference schools. Okay, let's see what you're fucking made of then, right? No, don't be out there getting beat up by 25 points because at that point, I'd rather see High Point play. At least they're fun. But that's the way. That's the way I have it. In the East, I've got Duke, UConn. In the South, I had Vanderbilt there in the Elite Eight. I don't know who will win Iowa and Nebraska now, but they're likely to take on Houston in the Elite Eight. In the West, I've got Arizona, Purdue, and in the Midwest, I've got Michigan, Iowa State. So when it came to here to this point, I was pretty much just chalk 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Was the way I had, except for the South, where I had Florida playing Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt beating Florida again, and then Vanderbilt taking on Houston, with Houston going to the Final Four. My Final Four, I've got Duke and Houston, Arizona and Iowa State, and then national championship, I've got Duke against Arizona, and my champ is Arizona. And yes, that's partly because I fucking hate Duke, but it's also because I believe Arizona is just the best team in the country. And you said you don't fill out a bracket, so
yeah, I mean, I'm not too far off from where you are, though. Duke, of course, is the legacy kind of a powerhouse here, and so it's never a bad bet to go with them. But I mean, Michigan and Arizona are kind of just beating teams left and right. With Arizona, really kind of their engines are really hot, and so it'll be interesting. I kind of have a gut feeling that I think Houston might make a little bit more noise, but outside of that, I don't really see anything apart from like what you said with Arizona going at least in a championship, if not winning it all. But I also wouldn't be surprised if a team like Duke, squeaks it out and puts a few upsets on.
Fucking Keenan hates baseball. He'll comment every so often, baseball sucks. It's a smart person sport. So that's where his comment comes from here. Midwest Eagles nest wise, as far as our standings here, our good friend Lee is at the top of the bracket. He's got 51 points. His max that he can score is 175. Tied at 51 points with him is actually my boss, Chris Jackson, but his max is only 115 because he had Florida winning the whole thing.
Ooh.
Then we have our good friend Scott Calcaterra with 49 points. He's got a max of 169. He's got Arizona winning it all. And right behind him is yours truly with 48 points, a max of 172. And I've got Arizona winning the whole thing. So we will see what the Sweet 16 brings. This is where your brackets really get busted, right? Like, if you can't keep pace come Sweet 16 time, you just throw the thing in the garbage and just enjoy the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Still here driving Jordan to tumbling class. Well, don't be commenting while you're driving, dude. Like,
Texting and driving.
But that's your tournament in a nutshell right now. Of course, next week when we're on here, we will, we'll talk about what happened over this weekend. But we got about 20 minutes left here, and Mason wasn't able to join us last week, and I know he's been chomping at the bit to talk birds. So before you get it all out, I got one question for you and for everyone in the room who's, pretty much all Birds fans except for Lou from Dade. Why does the Philadelphia sports media hate their own players and teams? Why continue to drag up all of this drama? It is a constant barrage of, well, we signed Hollywood Brown. What does that mean for AJ? Well, could we still move AJ at the draft? It's just AJ trade stuff after it. Shut the fuck up. We are in our championship window, okay? Unless AJ Brown is literally tearing the team apart, which none of us are going to know, and that includes all the dipsticks that do this Philadelphia sports media that I'm talking about right now. None of us are going to know that. So short of that, I'm not trading a player of AJ Brown's caliber. I'm not. You have to be out of your freaking mind. And then you bring it, well, could they trade him during the season? Trade him during the season. The only way that happens is we start losing games. Right? If we're winning, you're not trading AJ Brown. Like, get off of it already. If something happens, it happens. Can we just leave AJ alone? None of this helps anything. None of it. It's all just that goddamn media up there and their freaking nonsense. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
Well, definitely isn't something I haven't heard from other people who may not be a Birds or not from Philadelphia. They come and kind of listen to Philly sports media and like, wow, you guys are really you guys hate your own teams. Like the reality is that Philadelphia in regards to sports are a very prideful fan base across all the sports. And so if, when news is a little bit slow and, we don't have anything kind of actively kind of feeding content, we do tend to kind of go out into a little bit of a tinfoil kind of conspiracy, kind of what if scenarios and just trying to kind of make up, but we certainly do go farther than some other fan bases. I'm not totally against trading AJ, to be completely honest. But when it comes to the cap situation, you literally just can't do anything until June 1st anyway. And so it's really not even worth talking about it. We said it multiple times on the show that there's a legit chance that AJ might be traded only because he doesn't end up. Yeah. The only reason why he would get traded is because he doesn't end up matching or blending in with Sean Mannion's system. And so in that situation, that's the only real case that you'll see it. But we also have until June to figure that out. And I don't see him getting traded during the draft because I think people don't really realize if we traded AJ right now for a first round pick, let's say, we're eating more than I think it's like $20 million in dead cap. If we wait to June 1st and Sean Mannion's like, hey, he doesn't fit the scheme, let's just trade him for good capital, I think we end up saving $4 or $7 million. And so I don't think that there's going to be a situation during the draft where we are going to eat $20+ million to move up for a certain player. I just don't think that's going to happen. And so I really think that everything regarding that is kind of a wash. And like you said, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. We don't know what Mannion thinks about AJ behind the scenes. And we're not going to know. We're not going to even be able to really see what, when the rubber meets the road in terms of training camp, seeing AJ run the routes that Sean Mannion wants him to, see him in the system that Sean Mannion runs. We don't know anything, and we're not going to know until that time. And so, like I said, AJ Brown on principle, I'm not against trading, but let's stop acting as if this is going to happen in a month or two. It's not.
It's got to stop. And I don't want to, it's not like there's nothing else to talk about here. Baseball's about to start, right? The Phillies are about to kick off their campaign here, right? Like, and I know the Sixers and the Flyers don't give you much to freaking root for here, but my God, you're a couple of days away from the Phillies opener. You got the draft, which is 1 month from yesterday. So how about we focus on what the hell the Birds need to acquire in the draft rather than what we need to unload as far as star power? Like, Jesus Christ, enough with the A.J. Brown stuff. And then there's Jalen Carter. That I think could happen. That one I think could happen. But back to A.J. for just 1 minute. Not only does it make no cap sense that you and I, we've beaten that horse to death as well.
Yeah.
But now Miami, and, shout out to you, Lou, from Dade. The Dolphins just traded Waddle to the Denver Broncos for a 4th-round pick swap and a 1st and a 3rd for Jalen Waddle, who, nice receiver, don't get me wrong, he is not A.J. Brown. It's not close to A.J. Brown. There's never been a time when I've looked at Jalen Waddle and said, that's a top 5 wide receiver in football. Those words have never come out of my mouth. I like Jalen Waddle. I think the move, and I like what Denver did. Fuck it. Trade the picks. Cash in. Go get him now. I think it's deadly, him being added to the other side of Cortland Sutton. I think it's a huge, great move for Denver. But what do you think the asking price that Howie was out there trying to get for AJ already was huge? What the hell do you think it's going to be now? Nobody's paying that. Get out of here.
Yeah, I know exactly. And I kind of use the associative property with Jalen Carter. We saw the proposed trade being tentatively agreed to from X Crosby with 2 first-round picks. And that's a guy who's older with more strenuous injury histories than Carter. Carter is younger. He has a lot higher ceiling, of course. And the problem is that he's going to break the bank for whoever gets him. And so that inherently lowers that, or kind of caps the political capital in that sense. But it's the same principle. So you see a guy like Waddle get that much trade value, and a lot of teams aren't going to A, want to match that, or B, pay extra to offset the dead cap that we're going to take on anyway.
But no, I the asking price alone. Carter, now, I think Carter could get moved. I think Carter could get moved at the draft. The fact that we gave Jordan Davis that big cut, and again, a year ago, you would never even utter those words. 1 year ago, it's flipped on the other side, right? You're looking at Jordan Davis as like, the fuck's the matter with this kid?
Yeah.
Right? Then Carter, he's got shoulder problems throughout the season, started in August. He had the spitting thing with Dak. He just, and Davis came into camp in the best shape of his life and had a monster season and deserved the contract he got. But now that we've paid Jordan Davis that big contract, you are not going to pay 2 defensive tackles top of the market. You're not going to do that. So is this the offseason that Carter gets moved? I don't know, dude. I think you could go give him his – you pick up the 5th-year option regardless, and you have to do that this offseason. And whether you move him, maybe try to get 1 more year with the 2 of them together and see what you can get done this year. Sooner or later, this is because the other problem is come next offseason, now you got to make a decision on Cooper. He's second-round pick, so you don't have a 5th-year option thing with him. Quinny Mitchell's going to need his 5th-year option and or the extension, right? You've got big decisions that are going to have to get made next year. I don't know that there's room for Carter in that equation. I don't. You can't pay everybody. This is the one downside to being so excellent at the draft. There's all this talent comes due, and you can't pay everybody. We just saw Nakobe Dean go out the door. Should have came as a surprise to nobody, right? Once we gave Bond the big contract and drafted Campbell, Dean's days were numbered. The same thing is going to keep happening every year as we continue to draft well. It's going to be tough decisions. You and I told the audience that months ago, that there were going to be some very, very difficult decisions. That's not going to stop, right? The one that's really going to break people's hearts is when Saquon comes due. And then when Jalen comes due, Jalen Hurts, right? These are going to be the ones, those 2 are going to really disturb some people because they're not both staying. That much I can promise you.
Yeah, I mean, Carter is in a paradox of talent and
Agreed.
production right now. If you're too good, then you're probably going to be moved because we either can afford you or we can uh, reallocate your value elsewhere on the team and stay relatively or as competitive. Um, I mean, we've mentioned this in previous shows that you know, this kind of dynamic between keeping Davis and potentially moving Carter was flipped. Of course, a lot can happen in 365 days or an entire football
Yeah.
season. And so here we are now. This is really interesting, kind of a thought experiment or what if scenario, because you have to assume that Howie doesn't have Carter in the long term plans to begin with. So if we're just going to assume that for granted, okay, fine. Then the question becomes, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to just assume that we're going to keep him for another year. And if we do keep him for another year, it means that we think that we at window is at least another year. We have another
Yep.
year in this window. And therefore, we're keeping the nucleus together before we blow it up. And hopefully it's not a full rebuild, it's just a reload. If you see Carter dealt this offseason, then you should be somewhat not perturbed, but somewhat worried about how Howie or the team or the organization kind of views where the team is more systemically. If you trade Carter this offseason, they obviously did not have as much of a high hopes for just going raw next season and just saying, okay, we think that we have 95% of what we need. Let's just put our heads down and go. If Carter is dealt, we're not 90%, 95%, or probably not even at 90%. And that's because the value that someone offered us this off season is worth more than just having him play for us for another year and potentially risking either him doing really well or him having another deflationary year and taking his value. So in that instance, we locked down the cheaper guy who's going to be probably a better fit in the system going forward. But Carter's in a really tight spot. I do not see him signing a second contract with us outside of the 5th-year option. I really don't.
No.
So it really just comes down
he's
to
going to want
his
money.
Yeah, it's going to be a question of whether or not he's traded this offseason or next. It depends on how he sees the team. If he sees us as a contender still, he's going to wait a year. If he wants to reload now and see if he can elongate or maybe move the window not next year, but then the year after or whatnot, you'll see him traded this year.
I think you can make an argument that trading if he gets dealt this offseason, I think it has to be at the draft, at or before the draft, this year's draft, like sometime over the next 4 weeks. Yeah. Because I think you're going to want the
like
return.
A draft night?
You're going to want those picks this year to try to go get what you need to restock the farm at that position and others, right? You trade Carter, you're not doing it for less than at least a 1 and a 2. Yeah, you're just not doing it, dude.
Oh, at least. I was thinking the 2 first-round picks were
yeah, and it may very well be two ones. And maybe he dangles it out there and nobody bites. And then we just stick with Carter for 1 more year. I would like to see them go 1 more year. You're not obligated to trade him. You're not obligated to give him any more money right now. Mm-mm. So I would like to see it go 1 more year. And, the way that would look is Carter, 1 more season, he knows he's got to get back right. You know what I mean? Like he had a bit of an off year. And Andy Bagley's point over here, Davis's numbers are up because he plays alongside Carter to an extent. But this past season, we saw a very banged up Carter, right? We saw Davis kind of take that mantle this past season. It wasn't so much Jalen Carter like it had been the year before. It was Davis that stood up, and that's why Davis got the contract. A year ago, I thought at this point we would be signing Carter to the long-term deal and be ready to jettison Jordan Davis. But, things happen the way they happen. You block a field goal and that size running 20 miles an hour, bro. Like, that's a freakish thing. Yeah. But again, they're not going to pay both of them top of the market. You can't pay top of the market 2 guys at one position and expect to contend.
You have to continue to draft well.
Million. Yes, that's the part that everybody needs to understand. He is going to set the market at his position. You're already paying Jordan Davis that type of contract, right? It's not going to be as big as Carter, but it's that type. It's a setting the market type of contract at his position.
Yeah, he's
You
resetting.
can't do it with both of them. You can't. You got too much other talent that you're going to have to pay.
That's why
like
when
we
I
talked
saw
about before, Cooper and Mitchell.
Yeah, that's why when I saw the Phillips contract, I actually felt a lot better about letting him go because there's no way in hell we're paying him $30 million. And it's
the guy got $120 million contract, 80 of it guaranteed. There's no chance in Philly with that. No way.
So there's a lot of triage that has to be done. And as much as a salary cap may be a very fungible number, it can only be fudged so much. And you can't pay everybody on the team $40 million. You just can't. You just can't.
You can't do it.
And so we gave Davis, was it 27, I think, officially, because it was 3-year, either 81 or 78. And so it's in the upper 20s there. Carter's going to get 40 or 45 million. That's just what it is. And so that's why we're going to hedge him a little bit in terms of what we can get. But with the moves that Howie's done around the defensive line, which is very interesting to me, I think we're positioning ourselves very well to attack other holes on the team. And so I think it's another example of how we making the not so flashy moves, but it's added depth, and at the positions that we got it at is much needed, and it's going to have a lot more value than a splashy sign up.
All right, so Andy Bagley again. The offense will get younger, and they will have money for Carter. All right, look. Jalen's not getting any younger. Saquon's not getting any younger. Smitty's not getting any younger. Mailata's not getting any younger. Dickerson's not getting any younger. Lane Johnson's not getting any younger. Cam Jurgens isn't getting any younger. That's 7 guys I just named on our starting roster that are already under contract, and they're not small deals either. They're going to be back again next year under these same deals. So I understand this will be it for Goddard, so we'll save some money at the tight end spot. I got it. But where else are you thinking we're saving money? It's not likely to happen on the offensive side of the ball. You just can't pay 2 defensive tackles. You can't have one guy set the market and the other guy be like 5th in the league in salary at that same position. Right. It's too much money being spent there. You would have to seriously hurt yourself somewhere else. Or you'd have to rework the shit out of a bunch of contracts. And don't get me wrong, Howie's a wizard. Would I love to see both of them stay? Absolutely. I just don't think that's the way Howie plays ball, man.
Yeah, and I think that we're also not putting a lot of value on the trade value that Jalen might, that Carter might have. That's
how you save money.
It's going to be capped, though, only because the team that's going to be trading the farm for him isn't going to also want to give 2 first-round picks and a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick and also have to pay him $40 million. So there's a kind of a give and take there. But I think that if you do run it back one more year with Carter, then you pocket 2 first-round picks and you go about your business. You have 2 more first-round picks than you did last year, and you have enough space to allocate valuable cap to other pieces in the team that are going to be, maybe more valuable and more, efficient or functional or whatnot. And plus, you have 2 first-round picks. You have 2 more young guys you could add to the team that have tremendous value or talent.
And that's how you keep your championship window open, is exactly how you just outlined. It's exactly how Howie does it. Trenches outward and stay young, right? And don't pay everybody the big contract. You can't. Unleashed 5335. Not sure who that is. Welcome aboard. He says, is the D2 lineman of the year worth a draft pick? Kid did 35 on the bench and has 4 natties at that level. Yeah, he's worth the draft pick. My thing is, when it comes to the draft, it's always best player available at a position of need. And at least for the first 3 rounds, I want those picks coming from major schools playing in big-time conferences. SEC, Big 10, Big 12. That's where I want these picks coming from. Unless you find an anomaly like a Quinion Mitchell, right, out of Toledo, the MAC. Those guys are not normally your first round guys. You know what I mean? So is he worth the pick? Sure. Is he worth it round 1, 2, or 3? I don't know. I don't think we're in that dire of a need. Offensive line, I think that's where our dire need is right now. But Andy Bagley, I think Jalen, he's talking about Hurts, might be gone after this year. I don't think he's going to be gone, but Mason, you and I tend to agree on this. Do not be surprised, people, if a second or third round pick next draft in the 2027 draft is spent on a quarterback. And I'll do you one better. If Carter does get traded and it reels in a couple of first round picks, say for the 2027 draft, that could make the quarterback position very, very interesting. And I know nobody wants to hear that, all the Jalen supporters. I love Jalen Hurts, but you know how ruthless Howie is. He's always looking to turn it over and stay young and stay competitive. I don't know. I don't think Jalen will be gone next year, but I do think we're taking a quarterback in an earlier round than people would like to feel comfortable about in 2027.
Yeah, the past couple of shows that I've been on, of course, with you, have been kind of warning the audience that Jalen Hurts might get the Carson Wentz treatment. And when you least expect it, you're going to spend a second round pick on a quarterback, and you're going to be like, really? Because that's almost like an implication that, you know what? We're going to have to reload pretty soon, and it's probably a lot sooner than you thought. And you may have been planning with this guy for 3 or 4 years. And when Jalen was drafted, oh my God, Philadelphia nearly burnt down.
I know. So,
we're just giving you a heads up. Like, hey, this is not unprecedented for Howie.
It's not.
It's his contract is ticking, and so it goes through 28. And so 27 is like the year that we said that if it happens, it would happen there, just because you'll have Hurts for another maybe year or two and then see what happens. But it's gonna be probably a little bit more of a shock, only because Hurts doesn't have as much of an injury history that Wentz did. Wentz, of course, had the back, he had the ACL, he had a whole litany of things that are kind of.
He also had an attitude problem,
and so
huge attitude problem.
Jalen doesn't have that. Jalen has, knock on wood, stayed remarkably healthy. And so it's going to be a little bit of a shocker, but to Howie, nothing's a shock.
No,
not anymore.
Nothing's a shock. All right, Mason. So, we've covered a bunch of birds here. What else was on your radar as far as the Eagles with you not being able to be here last week? I want to give you the opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Jones, I'm a big fan of that pickup. He's a speedster, mainly from New England, and so that's just added depth to the secondary, which is what was direly needed. I mean, I think our fourth corner was Keely Ringo, and now our fourth corner is looking to be Jonathan Jones, which is superb. Now our cornerback room looks like Mitchell, Woolen, and then in the slot you'll have Cooper for any nickel purposes, and then if you want to run dime, you could just throw Jonathan Jones out there, and they're all speedy, and so you're not really going to be caught off guard with any Kansas City or any Green Bay who has this fifth on a depth chart receiver who just runs a 4.3 and you're screwed. It's not going to happen. Sure. Speaking of a fast guy who's buried in the depth chart, Marquise Brown is now probably the best third receiver in the league.
Yeah, I like that. I think
that's a really good pickup. So I said the Marquise Brown has pretty much a remarkably identical athletic profile to Dotson. They're smaller guys. They're more burners than anything, and all they're really going to be there for is to either A, catch a 40-yard bomb, or B, catch a 5-yard or a 5-yard either a hitch or a drag or whatnot. They're just there to keep the defense honest, and for a guy like Marquise Brown who has legitimate take the top off speed, that's really fun, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that develops. And so I like how Howie has maintained the talent level in the roster, how he's hedging the kind of roles on the team, and and of course, as always, if anybody had the Andy Dalton going to the Eagles on their bingo card, you get to check that off. Picking up the red rifle for a Lay's bag of potato chips. That's
I
always
just
nice to
like
see as well for depth.
I can't call him the beige water pistol anymore. The Hollywood Brown thing. I like that. I like that move. We've talked about it on here, and a lot of people, they didn't get Dotson involved enough, and we've talked about it on here. To this point, as long as Nick Sirianni's been the coach and Jalen's been the quarterback, and we've been more run heavy, the wide receiver 3 spot really hasn't been a focal point, right? It's just not. By the time you get to that progression, it's time for the quarterback to get out of the pocket. You're talking A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley. And by that point, Jalen needs to get out of there. So, like you said, unless it's a designed play on a 40-yard go route, which we used to do with Quez Watkins a bunch, unless that comes up, the wide receiver 3 spot's not a big deal. This is kind of a big deal. This is more than we've spent. We're spending more on Hollywood Brown in that spot than we've spent on the previous couple of guys combined. I think Hollywood got up to $6.5 million, I think, with incentives. So, you look at that signing. $5 million, but could go up to 6.5. We paid Jahan Dotson $1 million last year. That's a huge increase at that position. Tells me one of two things. Actually, it tells me one thing. Well, maybe a couple of things. One, I think Mannion is in his ear. I need more depth at the wide receiver spot because I want to throw the ball around more, which I don't know how big of a fan of that I am. But moreover, I think this kind of goes to our point about, are we drafting a quarterback next year? Because when you put a Hollywood Brown out there as a number 3 option on your wide receiver core, your excuses for not being able to throw the ball around go away. You've now got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Hollywood Brown, and Dallas Goedert all going to be on the field at the same time. If you can't complete passes, and I don't care where it is, outside the numbers, crossing routes over the middle of the field, we may have a quarterback problem at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about it like that. I think that I would agree. Largely, I would agree with that. Kind of speaking to we've kind of spoke on this concern before, like, Dotson wasn't really used. Like, listen, when the Rams had the whole gang in the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't think anybody in St. Louis was sweating that Ricky Prohl wasn't getting enough targets. Okay, when you have Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Marshall Faulk on a team,
right,
you're not really worried about whether or not Ricky Prohl had 400 yards receiving on the year. It's just not a concern. And so, like I said, the third receiver spot is only there to keep the defense honest. And it's going to be used to either take the top off or to, if they're playing a little bit of a deep zone, run a drag, get him the ball, and let him have 10, 15 yards yak. That's literally what they're going to be used for. $5 million, I guess, relative to what we're paying Dotson is a lot of money, but this is all the NFL where values are inflated, and Marquise Brown is a lot better of a player than Jahan Dotson is.
Yes, he is.
And so, like I said, Marquise Brown is probably easily the best third receiver in the league. But to your point, this whole kind of restructuring is subtly a hedging against Jalen, saying, hey, listen, we know that you're not Mahomes, you're not Allen. Okay, we're not expecting you to be. But show us a little bit of something. Show us a little bit of something here. We're giving you A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Yes, Goddard's aging, but you have a Goddard. You have Saquon, who's not a receiving back, and he does have really bad drops occasionally, but on screenplays, I mean, he's a dynamic guy. And now you have Marquise Brown, who's your third receiver. There's a lot shrinking. The list of excuses are shrinking, and with a Sean Mannion offense, where we saw someone like Malik Willis do really well, and he saw steps of progression with Jordan Love, with not the greatest receiving core imaginable. It does kind of seem as if we're either not either. We're telling Jalen, listen, hey, you either develop as a passer, and we don't always have to run or lean exclusively on Saquon, or we're going to start positioning ourselves to get someone who will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the way this is going. Of course, there's the devil's advocate and the Philly sports media portion of it, where is the Hollywood Brown signing a safety blanket in case we trade AJ. Look, Hollywood is not AJ, all right? But you know how they're going to spin it. Come on. You know how these fuckers are. Yeah. That's I don't think that's the thing. I think this is it's time to look, we're in a passing league. And while we do want the run game to be our bread and butter, we've got to be able to throw the ball around.
Yeah.
We just have to be able to do it. So that's where I sit. All right, Mason. Final thoughts, buddy.
Final thoughts. We've already seen a couple upsets in March Madness. This is the best part about the tournament easily. But we are kind of getting to that stretch where the good team should win and the bad team should lose. But it only makes the upsets more exciting. I agree with you. I can see Arizona either at least getting to the championship, if not winning it all. But I do think that Duke is always just a threat, just kind of being there to begin with.
Unfortunately.
Carter is either going to be dealt this year if the team wants to reload, or next year if you want to go ahead and run it back. Get AJ Brown in your mouth. It's not going to happen anytime soon. If it does happen, it's not happening until June. Okay, get a dog. It'll be fine. Okay, if you have to turn the volume down on the radio. Okay, you don't want to have that much, negativity put into your head. So turn on the radio. Okay, turn up us.
Take the tinfoil hat off.
Yeah, listen, I know that you guys want to, if your life may fortunately not be full of drama, be careful about how much you choose to import. Okay, don't import too much. AJ Brown's not going to be traded until at least June 1st, if he gets traded at all. Carter will get traded because we are just not going to pay that much money, but I don't know if it's going to be this year or next. And Jalen Hurts better be watching his back the same way that Carson did. His time might be coming up, and he might be seeing a new face in that room with a lot of talent as soon as next year.
I'm agreeing with you here. Keenan chimes in. So what I hear is Hurts will not be a lifelong Eagle, like Kermit Mahomes will be a Chief until death. Well, so
Mahomes will own part.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go there yet, right? Like I think this is the Hollywood Brown being added as your third receiver is okay, Jalen. We're giving you all of the tools to be able to be successful with your arm. We know you can do it with your legs. We want that to continue to be a thing, but we need to be able to see you do it with your arm as well. Now, my closing thought, I believe Jalen Hurts is a smart kid. I think he works hard. I think he's a great leader. And I think if there's a quarterback capable of rising to that, it's Jalen Hurts. And I don't want Jalen Hurts to go anywhere. But if this offense struggles in the pass game again this year, you're going to start getting some, and you already know how toxic that Philly sports media is. Those questions are going to start coming early and often about, to your point, Malik Willis. Mannion and LaFleur had that kid looking good. Mm-hmm. So if we can't be successful pass game wise this year with the additional talent, it's going to be one of two things will happen. It's either going to be a Sirianni problem or it's going to be a Jalen problem. And the last time we were faced with, is it a coach or quarterback problem? We ended up getting rid of both. So as far as the NCAA tournament, enjoy the games, right? They'll tip back off on Thursday night for the Sweet 16. Sweet 16 games wrap up on Friday. Then your winners from there will play your Elite 8 games on Saturday and Sunday, setting up for a Final Four on Easter weekend, Saturday night. We are actually a week from Thursday driving to Maryland. Grady will finish up his AIT training at Fort Meade. So we're going to see him graduate from there. And I can tell you now, with the Final Four being in Indianapolis, which is only an hour and a half away from me, if UConn happens to get there, I will be driving like a bat out of hell back here on that Saturday, slowing down in front of my house, telling my wife to tuck and roll, and I am immediately off to Indianapolis for the Final Four. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. But if it does, there's a chance. So enjoy the games. Keep getting ready for that draft coming up. You were what? It was a month from yesterday. Is the first round. So keep doing your homework, and we'll keep as that gets closer and closer. We're going to keep talking more and more draft. What the Eagles should do, particularly with that number one, with the first round pick. And then we'll keep watching for any whispers about a Jalen Carter move. I don't believe AJ's going anywhere right now, though. So, folks, that's what we got for this week. Come on back again next week. We'll give you the date when we get the work schedules figured out. Next week's going to be a little hectic for me, given that I am hitting the road. Tuesday's probably going to be the night. At this point, because Wednesday, if I can get out of here Wednesday and get half that trip done, and then finish it up on Thursday, that'd be great. But we'll kind of see how that goes. So come on back again next week. Enjoy the tournament. Enjoy the upcoming weekend. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. Remember, that fucking judge ain't coming back till Monday, folks. And as always, Mason, how does it go?
Go Birds.
Go Birds!